The Big 12 has 3 playoff caliber teams. Now, that is 3 12-team playoff caliber teams. I did not say the Big 12 has 3 national championship caliber teams. I think the Big 12 has 1 potentially national championship caliber team and 3 playoff caliber teams, but I think the Big 12 is probably going to be stuck with just 1 team in, and I think there's a very good chance the SEC gets 6 in. All right, so let's break that down. Let me first clarify here that what we have with Utah and BYU are 2 teams that fit perfectly into criteria of like these teams are good enough to be 12-team playoff teams. Maybe there's a stumble left in one of these teams. I could say that BYU could go lose to Cincinnati. I suppose that is possible, right? But I think to this point, they have both proven themselves to be of that caliber of team, even if there is a slip up the rest of the way. That does not mean they're a national championship caliber team. And I think this is where people get things a little bit twisted sometimes. If you take some people's word for it, like the only teams that should be allowed into the playoff, like are teams that could legitimately win the national championship. And look, if that's your stance, I do respect that. It's just if that's the stance, then we need to go back to like a 4-team playoff. We should not be doing this extended 12-team playoff. There are not enough teams to cover that, even though the margins are thinner between 1 and 17, as we have covered this year. The stat between 1 and 17 used to be a 3-touchdown difference, according to SP Plus. Now it's 1. There is more parity, but I don't think there are more than like 6 or 7 teams that you would say could legitimately win like 3 or 4 games to win a national championship, right? So let's start with that. But if we're going to do a 12-team playoff and we're talking about teams that could fit into a top 12 that are like of that caliber, BYU and Utah fit that bill for sure. You know, I mean, I think Utah does have some limitations specifically based on just like they can't. Bear Bachmeier now can throw you back into a game. I do believe that. I think we've seen enough from him. I don't think Devin Dampier can do that. I don't think Bird Ficklin is ready to do that. So Utah's a team that's just designed to pummel teams that are not tough, pummel teams that are just average to maybe above average. And that's kind of what they are. But to me, that's good enough based on what we've seen from the rest of college football to be in the top 12, to be a team that would be of the caliber of a 12-team playoff, not a team that's going to be able to win a national championship. Too limited in what they can do. But what they can do, they do very, very well. I think that's good enough to be a playoff caliber team. Similar story with BYU. I think we've just seen when held up against Texas Tech, a team that I do believe is national championship caliber, they can't quite hold up. Well, really, I say they can't quite hold up. That's being a bit kind as to what we saw the result was in Lubbock. But I think those are all fair to say. Like the Big 12, if things break right, could absolutely have 3 teams that are playoff caliber, would go in there and not get embarrassed, right? Would be able to hold their own. Or even if they didn't, you know, we had this conversation last year about, you know, Lane Kiffin and teams that go in and get blown out. That doesn't mean that they weren't playoff caliber or they weren't deserving of their spot. When you have a playoff like this and there are only 4, 5, 6 teams that are legitimately good enough to win it all, you're going to get some blowouts in a playoff. That's sort of what happens. Okay, so I think that's a really important distinction to make off the top here. The problem is, guys, I don't see how right now the path opens up aside from BYU winning out and losing a close game to Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship. I have a hard time seeing what the path is for the Big 12 to get an at-large. And I was the same guy that a couple of weeks ago told you that I see Utah having a real path here once they started out at 13 in the playoff rankings. But some things have changed now. And I'm going to go through this list. If you were watching my live streams over the weekend, you've already heard some of this. But the list of things that happened that was disadvantageous to the Big 12 is like 3-1 to the things that were advantageous to the Big 12. Okay, so here's what hurt the Big 12. I start with this, and I think this is only a very, very, very small thing. But Cincinnati losing to Arizona hurts just a little bit because if you wanted to have another ranked team and a team that could be a ranked win for, say, like BYU coming up this week, it would have been nice to have Cincinnati still at the back end of the top 25 because I don't think that Arizona is going to get into the committee's top 25. They're 35th in the AP poll. I don't think they have quite enough juice for that right now. So it takes away a ranked win. It takes away another ranked team from your conference. I don't think that's a huge deal at all, though. Here's what is. Notre Dame just smacked Pitt 37-15. Thank you, Pat Narduzzi. What are you good for here, sir? Notre Dame's essentially guaranteed a playoff spot. They've got 2 gimmies coming up in Syracuse and Stanford. They'll finish with 2 more wins. Oklahoma wins at Alabama. Hard to see Oklahoma not making the field now, too. They finished with Mizzou and LSU at home. Mizzou playing with a third-string quarterback. LSU, interim head coach. Oklahoma's probably winning both, even if they split. I think Oklahoma would still have a really good chance to win, or to get in, rather. They just beat Alabama, right, on the road. Ole Miss was getting a real fight from Florida. I mean, that looked like that could be a game that Florida wins legitimately for a while there. Ole Miss pulls it out. They win by 10. That would have helped to have that go the other way. USC was down by 14. 14 at halftime. They scored 19 straight to beat Iowa in a rainstorm. That should favor Iowa. Twice in a row, we've seen Iowa lose in a rainstorm. Come on. Anyway, USC very much still in the mix. That would have helped. Michigan almost got beat by Northwestern. They get a game-winning field goal. They're still in the mix if they were to beat Ohio State. Now, I think that's pretty unlikely, but if they were to beat Ohio State, they're still in the mix. Georgia Tech, still kind of in the mix. I mean, they were losing at Boston College late. Took heroics to beat Boston College, who's about as bad as Oklahoma State, but they won. Still could be a threat if they went out and beat Georgia. Miami blew out NC State 41-7, and I really fear the Miami redemption arc from the playoff committee is going to continue after they were ranked probably too low in the first one at number 18. All right, those are all things that didn't help this week. Here are the things that I would say did help, that were nice. BYU winning and winning with style points. 44-13 over TCU. Style points, wire to wire. TCU was never in the game. Yeah, TCU's 6-4. It's at least a team that has had a pulse at times this year, and BYU just thumped them. Utah wins 55-28. Another win by 4 scores in Big 12 play, which all their Big 12 wins have been by. Texas Tech winning in blowout fashion also helps. Rack up the style points for all of the teams that are at the top of your league. Plus, Tech got to rest Baron Morton for over a half. And the flip side of Alabama losing is that should force them behind Texas Tech. So if we're talking about the battle to get Tech into the top 4, that does help you a bit. But you see how much longer that first list was, right? And that's where this gets complicated. It's not looking great. This is what I would say things look like right now. See, I'm going to have to take off the outline for you here. This is the playoff picture as I see it right now. Okay? I think you've got 10 spots that are virtually locked up, and then you'll have that bottom list, the at-large competition. You'll have those teams fighting it out for 2 spots. BYU, Utah, Oregon, USC, Miami, Texas, Vandy, Michigan. And a part of the problem with that is, well, you're looking at 2 SEC teams already, Texas and Vandy. Now, Texas will have to beat Texas A&M, which is certainly in doubt after how poorly they played at Georgia. But did you guys watch Texas A&M yesterday? Okay, I think Texas absolutely stands a chance to win that game. USC, big brand. Oregon, big brand. Miami, big brand. Michigan, big brand. Like, the competition there, that's not really what you want to see if you're a Big 12 fan. It gets tricky. Texas Tech, I'm calling a virtual lock as long as they just don't stumble at West Virginia. Texas Tech should be in. They probably need to win the Big 12 championship game as well. That's a really interesting case that we haven't considered a whole lot. If they were to get there and lose, what does their case look like? But Tech, I think it's fair to say virtual lock. Ohio State and Indiana, they're going to be in. I think the winner of Oregon USC is going to be in. Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, they're going to be in. Write it in Sharpie. Bama, Oklahoma, very good chances to be in. Vandy, Texas, one of those teams at least, which would make the 6th, right? When we talk about 6 SEC teams, you're talking about that top group of 5, and then Vandy if they beat Tennessee, Texas if they beat Texas A&M, and especially Texas if they beat Texas A&M. Doesn't that just seem like the most playoff committee thing ever, right? Texas sitting there at 9-3 with a nice tasty win over the committee's number 2 or 3 team in the country to end the regular season. Yeah, that feels like something that's going to happen. I mean, Miami, Miami almost is starting to feel inevitable now, and they at least played well on Saturday. Of course, the ACC Conference champ's going to be in, and that won't be Miami. Notre Dame's going to be in. You know what G6 is going to be in. So just to give you a picture of what I think things really look like right now, that is it. That's what you're up against if you're the Big 12 right now. So here is to close the book on this, like your idea here. If your ultimate goal, you're a Big 12 fan, your squad's in the mix here, here's what you want. This is what you want. If you want the SEC to not get 6 teams in, if you want the Big 12 to actually get multiple teams in and or get a team into the top 4, this is your wish list for the playoff rankings coming up on Tuesday. You're going to want to get Texas Tech into the top 5, which should be just a formality at this point after Alabama loses, but you never know. You never know. I don't think Alabama is going to stay in front of Texas Tech, but you never know. I don't think Ole Miss would leapfrog Texas Tech after a win over, 3-6 now, Florida. I don't think that would happen, but you never know, okay? SEC wonks will tell you about how Florida is actually a really talented team. Any given Saturday, they could jump up and beat you. They do have a high level, even though we know their record and their story this year, okay? You'll get some of that. Number 2 on the wish list, outside of getting Texas Tech into the top 5, how about drop Texas to at least 15? Get Texas as far away from that top 10 as possible after Georgia blistered them 35-10. It was a 25-point loss. Texas has also lost to that same Florida team that I just referenced, who is not very good. Texas has one side of the ball that's pretty impotent, and it's offense. They are not a good offensive team. If you're just eye testing this thing, Texas offense, not good. They are ungood. Drop Texas to at least 15. And then, last thing here on the wish list, keep USC and Miami below Utah and BYU. Those are 2 that I fear. It's not like people have this crazy amount of respect for Iowa. There's some. I wouldn't think that USC having to come back and beat them at home would vault them above either Utah or BYU, but you just never know. Okay? You just never know. You see the colors. You know about the helmet, fight on, all that stuff. USC could be tempting for a committee that now does not have a Big 12 chair, by the way. And then Miami crushed NC State. It seemed like there was some guilt last week for putting Miami all the way down at 18 in the first edition of the rankings. I think that's at least worth keeping your eye on. So that's what you want. Get Tech in the top 5, drop Texas to at least 15, keep USC and Miami below Utah and BYU. All right. That's state of the Big 12 playoff union on Sunday, November 16th. That's where we stand.